Us live now is Professor John Blaxland from the ANU. Professor Blaxland, thank you for your time. Now, there are real concerns about how China's conducted itself through this coronavirus pandemic. Do you see the relationship with China ever being what it once was?
Very good question, Annalise. Thanks for having me on the program. Yes, I think we're seeing the return of great power contestation on a level that we haven't seen since the Cold War. And it's not the Cold War, but it is certainly, we're seeing propaganda, we're seeing obfuscation, we're seeing the exercise of media manipulation and control of China's narrative and its own story in a way that speaks to a pretty adversarial approach that China is taking towards others, couched in a way that is very, very, very positive in terms of they do, involved in gifting substandard equipment, and often, as it turns out, with a lot of media fanfare to make sure that people are aware that China's gifting it, but at the same time pushing the sales of Chinese goods to make sure, in an attempt to prevent others from filling that market that China has come to dominate over the last few years. So there's a real concern here. I think that China's delay in releasing information, its allowance of flights out well after the period when they knew it was problematic, the influence of the World Health Organization, the removal of critical journalists from Beijing, the control of the story speaks to an approach by China that is one that I think Peter Dutton is very right to question. But interestingly also, here's, I think, the real problem, and people haven't been calling it out quite clearly enough, and I noticed a number of media outlets are really dancing around the issue of Chinese statistics and their credibility. It's just highly implausible that China has just somehow overnight turned off the growth in numbers. And there are estimates by some reputable organisations, think tanks and the like, that are saying the stats are out by an order of magnitude of 10, if not more, with some claiming up to 2.5 million possible victims of coronavirus inside China. China is controlling this message, and it's doing so, I believe, to gain advantage over the United States and over its other partners, economic partners, to gain strategic advantage. And we need to be open-eyed about what's going on. We need to have a sober discussion about what the implications are for us in Australia and with our neighbours and with our allies. And of course, that's problematic a little bit because
President Trump moving to defund. Sorry to interrupt you. What do you make of President Trump moving to defund the WHO? There's been strong pushback against that from a lot of Australian politicians, saying that now is not the time to undermine the Global Health Organization. But there are serious concerns about how it's operating at this time, and really there should be a push to make them be at least more open and accountable about how they're operating in China.
Yeah, there's no question. There's a call for greater openness and accountability. The terrible irony, of course, is that the World Health Organization is a body that was set up much with US funding and US initiative. And so for the United States to walk back from its leadership in these domains, World Health Organization and other international organizations, is a real tragedy. And it's clearly part of a game that China wants to see the United States squeezed out of. So on one front, that's kind of a bit of an own goal, because the United States, I would argue, should not be walking away. It should be doubling down on insisting on its influence being retained in the World Health Organization and other bodies of that ilk. But the United States is led by a president who's very transactional and very much focused on domestic issues. And with the absence of American leadership on this, in contrast to American leadership over SARS a decade and a half ago and other international issues of this nature, points to a bit of a vacuum that China seems to be trying to fill. But there's growing awareness that really, if you let China fill this vacuum, you really are taking on a poison chalice, because China's approach is adversarial, and it is not supportive of the values and of the institutions we in liberal Western democracies hold dear. And we need to be very careful about what's going on. I'm at the Australian National University. We've been subject to cyber attacks that people don't want to call out, but they effectively, we know,
Yeah.
are linked to China.